Here we go. 4, 5, and we are here live, transmitting through all kinds of places: Rumble, YouTube. I don't know if Facebook. No, we're not on Facebook. I think we are. Um, and um, and I'm with Sacred Blue Heron Woman. I am Julian Katari, and we are doing the 89th version of Ayni Living Conversations. And in this version, or this session, we are continuing on the sustenance branch of the Great Principle that took us first, well, not first, but at some point took us through cognition, which then took us to behavior, and now takes us to social phenomena. So I think those are kind of linked to each other, kind of like a sequence.
Yeah.
And because in order to get behavior, you need to have cognition, and in order to have social phenomenon, you need to have understand behavior. So I think this is going to be pretty amazing, pretty interesting, and it's always touches something that always attracts a lot of people that are waking up, which is finding out how much of a social behavior phenomenon, uh, how much control of the social behavior there is, through the medias, through the big tech, through all kinds of gadgets they've set up and has been set up for a long time. And to get this started, Ingrid, last time we talked, you said something pretty cool, where you mentioned that that this last, I call it the ID-19 operation, the 2020 event, kind of marked the and it's so right. I wish you can say it again. It marked the beginning of an era of where everybody just was taken over. Everybody just gave up control. We went into a global imprisonment camp, a global concentration camp, something like that.
Yeah. Well, and it's actually been culminating for a very long time, because if you think about it, there's these people like Dr. Carrie Madej who are and Amazing Polly and stuff like this, who are going around saying, you know what they have planned for you. They want, and even Benjamin Fulford says this. They want to put you in a cubicle and harness your energy. Well, if you think about it, if you stop and think about it, they've been doing that for years. What is working at for a living doing? Harvesting your energy. As soon as human resources were a human and HR department was developed in a company, that's when your energy started being mined. So we've been living in a huge concentration camp already all our freaking lives.
Right. And that's not to and that's harvesting our physical energy, because if we go into that spiritual energy.
Well, that too, because especially for factory workers who go into an all man-made building all the time, your spirit guides, your elementals can't go in there with you. They just can't. It's too so you're devoiding yourself. That's also the way they're harvesting your energy. They can't touch those, but they're diminishing the energy, plus the clock time, the factory time. Everything is geared to harvesting your energy. Sure, you get a paycheck, but then, oh my God, then you got to get a loan to have a house. And as a slave, you're supposed to be given the benefit of a house. That's why there's a benefits department. But no, it became too expensive to give you benefits, especially when you want bigger and bigger, or don't want to live in a tent anymore. So then you got to start paying for it, which is another way of harvesting your energy. And you got to pay for the car you drive to work, which is another way of harvesting your energy. And you got to pay for the gas and pay for your food and pay for everything. It's time for us to understand they have been harvesting our energy for a very long time.
Right. And I was going to say that it goes back even before. I would postulate that it goes back before the boom of the industrial era, and there was already something kind of like that going on. from what I would call the theocracy. There was a theocracy before, kind of like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
reign of where instead of the technocratic arguments being used to dominate, there was God arguments. Oh, God is, religion used as a means of domination.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
So
that's
this is
another way they're harvesting your energy by give to the church, give to the church, give to the church, come to church, give to the church, give your money to the church, tithe your to the church. That's just another way of harvesting your energy, harvesting you.
right. So, do we have any words from the old ones? Or are we going to begin with
Absolutely, we do.
Awesome. So,
So
take, take it
we're
there.
listening to Ishmukane and Ishpiokok again. And they say, acknowledging responsibility is a risk because responsibility carries power. So part of Ayni, or co-commitment, co-creativity as a process, is learning to tell the microscopic truth. How do you know what's true? Well, the truth is that which absolutely cannot be argued about. So for example, you might say, oh, that Julian, he's just a jerk. Well, what would you do? You would argue with me about that, right?
Maybe depends if it was you, of course, but if it's a total jerk, I just wouldn't. It's no longer.
And if it wasn't you arguing, then somebody else would argue. Like your kids would probably argue, your mother would probably argue about that. So it's not the truth.
Yeah.
Right. So then you can go deeper and say, well, what is it about, since I'm using you for an example, what is it about Julian that makes me feel like he's a jerk while I feel angry with him?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's closer to the truth. So then then you got to go deeper. Well, why am I feeling angry with him? Well, because is he reflecting that part of me that I don't like? Because everyone is a mirror for us, right? Is he reflecting that part of my sacred animus that I don't like?
Mm-hmm.
That's when you get into the microscopic truth. So in close relationships, the truth is most likely to be a clear statement of feeling, of body, of sensation, of what you did. So examples, I'm scared. My shoulders are feeling tight as you talk. I have a pain in my chest. And right when you told me X, whatever you told me, I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. And then, well, I called so-and-so today. Those are all truths that are unarguable.
Mm-hmm.
So your human responsibility is to tell the microscopic truth for its own sake, not to please anybody else in any sort of relationship. And the closer you get to the microscopic truth, the less likely it is to cause or perpetuate arguments. Because microscopic truth refers to the deepest and most subtle truth that you can see and feel. It's never external. It's never self-righteous. It's always a clear, specific statement of what is happening inside yourself right here and now. Telling the truth just to communicate your internal experience is the only intention that is freeing. And where you humans are at today, it takes a lot of work on yourselves to become free and easy with the truth. And we want you to know that telling the microscopic truth brings about a state of lightness and energy in your body that few other things can engender. So to be in an Ayni co-committed relationship, conscious loving relationship, you must also keep your agreements, because aliveness is diminished when agreements are not kept. And so many of you humans are so terrified of closeness and the radical aliveness of a co-committed relationship that you will do virtually anything to mess it up. And when you're given the choice between drama and actual closeness, most of you choose drama. And then you say, I hate drama. I don't do drama. You're a drama queen. I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
Learning to keep your arguments is a matter of courage to get started and a matter of practice for the rest of your life. And lastly, learning to live in a state of natural, flowing, pulsing, expanding, opening energy is the last part of Ayni. Starting in childhood, most of you have been forced to put a lid on your natural flow in order to stay at the humdrum level of existence necessary to function in your mechanistic workday world. In Ayni, or co-commitment, co-creativity, your task is to learn how to stay in this natural way for longer and longer periods of time, so your body and soul can return to this natural way of being. And it takes a practice, because you can't just dive in. Your body, we've weakened our bodies as a container so much that to hold this natural pulsating flow is can be overwhelming and exhausting. So we've got to take it small bits at a time and let our body integrate it and become a stronger and stronger container. So when you live in Ayni, co-commitment, conscious loving, co-creativity, the only problem you will ever solve is how to solve is how you will allow yourself to expand continuously into more and more natural potential flow aliveness. When you get close to someone and share, like in a village, the positive energy is multiplied far beyond that of what each of you can attain on your own. And if you do not take the time to rest and integrate this new expansion, your unconscious mind will stop the flow. So we could call this the upper limits problem. What is your upper limit of expansion into natural flow, happiness, joyful? Some human beings call it positive energy, and we shy away from calling it positive energy, because then you automatically create the dichotomy of negative energy. So understanding that everything is an opposition. So if you say something's ugly, then there's got to be beautiful, right? So you've got to accept all of it. So it's a positive energy, but it's the natural pulsating flow of Tao. And your human bodies have to become used to it and allow it to integrate, so that you don't stop the flow. This is what addicts do. They can only handle so much of this flow, and then they got to cut it. They think they're making themselves feel better, but they're only better because they're numbing as to what might be the source of their pain.
Mm-hmm.
So pulsation is a universal truth that you can't get away from, that you can't transcend. If you did, your heart would stop and you'd die. Simple as that. So instead of your governed, human programmed pulsations of have fun and then crash, get close, have a fight, or break up, you can expand into a pulsation of open and rest in that openness to allow what just happened to integrate, so then you can open further. Because that is what a flower does. And you are all flowers. You human beings are all flowers or flowers of energy. A flower always opens outward.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the words from the old ones.
Wow. Except figs are open inwards.
What?
Figs
Figs?
are flowers, yeah, but they don't open.
Well, there's also an opening inward.
Right.
Because to open outward, you have to first open inward. To get to that microscopic truth, you have to open inwards first.
Wow. So this is what we have every week. Words from the old ones, and I like how it cuts through. Excuse my language. The bullshit. I mean, and I like how we're getting really good at that. We're not trying to mask anything, trying to kind of copy anymore a style, copy a way of saying something. We're just flow with it and say what it must be said. So I really like that. So now we go into the
social phenomena.
Social phenomenon. So what's going to be here?
Okay, So now we're going to look at what happens to your organism, or any organism, when it enters into structural coupling with other organisms.
Okay.
From the standpoint of one organism, the other organism represents a source of perturbations indistinguishable from those that come from non-biotic or non-living environment. It is possible for these interactions between organisms to acquire a recurrent nature in the course of their ontogeny. This will then result in consequent structural drifts, or co-ontogenies with mutual involvement, Ayni, through their reciprocal structural coupling, each conserving its adaptation and organization. When this happens, a new phenomenological domain arises, which may become particularly complex when there's a nervous system. Social phenomena or third order structural coupling arises if the organisms take part in recurrent interactions. And so then the third order couplings or social phenomena occur with definite complexity and stability, and as a result of the congruence of their respective ontogenic drifts. Third order couplings or social phenomena are absolutely necessary for the continuity of a lineage in organisms with sexual reproduction. For gametes have to meet and merge. They just have to. You're not going to have a baby if the male sperm doesn't meet the ovum. Just not going to happen. So let me repeat that again. Third order couplings or social phenomena are absolutely necessary to sustain life for the continuity of a lineage in organisms with sexual reproduction. For the gametes, sperm and ovum have to meet and merge.
Right. Which
In
then,
addition, what?
yeah. No, keep going.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that, but we already know that it's so evident that they're trying to screw us up with 2030 agenda. I mean,
Yeah.
And now we're in Gay Pride Month. I'm just so, I don't give that much of attention to it, but
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing that they would give, it's so evident. Oh, let's give it a month. Nothing else gets a whole month. This guy was saying, not even Jesus gets a month.
Yeah, I know.
So, keep going.
In addition, the organisms that require mating for the procreation of new individuals, the young need some care by the parents. So some degree of behavioral couples is common in generating and the rearing of young. Since third order couplings are a relatively universal phenomenon, they occur in different animal groups under a variety of forms. These forms differ both in how they occur and the additional phenomena they give rise to. As human beings brought up in this mechanistic culture, we tend to think that it is natural for the female to take care of her young and the male to look after their protection and sustenance. Supposedly, this image is based in part on the fact that we are mammals with more or less long periods of breastfeeding, during which the rearing is necessarily
associated. Go ahead, take care of it.
I have someone coming down the driveway.
When you live in the farm, you gotta be taking care. Well, it's still daylight.
Yeah, it is. So, okay. So,
here it's dark already.
So supposedly this image is based on the fact, in part on the fact that we are mammals with more or less long periods of breastfeeding, during which rearing is necessarily associated with the mother. And there are no animal species in which nursing is a male's responsibility or breastfeeding.
Right.
It's just not. So this clear-cut division of roles, however, is far from universal. Among birds, we find a very great variety of roles.
Mhm.
Much of the diversity of the third order coupling or social phenomena in which we participate rests on the immense diversity of behavioral couplings afforded by our nervous systems. We must keep this well in mind to understand human social dynamics as a biological phenomenon.
Mhm.
Sexual and rearing behavioral couplings are essentially transitory. There are many other types of behavioral couplings also, and they can go much further towards specifying among individuals of one group behavioral coordinations that can last a lifetime. The classic and more notable example of group behavioral coordinations or third order coupling that involves the entire ontogeny of participating organisms is that of social insects, ants, termites, wasps, and bees, and more. But in an ant colony, the ontogeny of each individual is contingent on the ontogenies of the others. And in a herd of antelope, they will all flee when an organism like us shows up to see them. They will run till they reach the higher ground, usually from where they can look and observe. And if they have to go through a valley or a piece of woods that impedes their view of our organism there, we will see a clear case of their social coupling as the herd then moves in a formation led by the dominant male, followed by the females and young, with other males bringing up the rear, and one of the males stays behind to keep an eye on us till the herd is safe, and then he goes and joins the herd. This is third order structural coupling or social phenomena.
Okay.
So life in third order couplings or social life permits individual vertebrates to participate in relations and activities that arise only as coordination of behaviors between otherwise independent organisms. And such coordination can take place through any form of interaction, chemical, visual, auditory, and so on. In the baboons that live on the savannas of Africa, we see ongoing and multiple interactions that are gestural, postural, or visual, and tactile. It's a dynamic system of hierarchical relations. This system defines the group, which is apparent when they migrate from one place to another or confront a predator such as a lion. All the behavioral diversity that we see in watching a herd of baboons on the savanna, not in a zoo, on the savanna, gives to each group its own stamp, and each individual is continually adjusting its position in the network of interactions that forms the group according to its own dynamics, and owes to its history of structural coupling in the group. Despite the organization, or despite the differences, there is no style of organization in each group of baboons. So we call social phenomena those phenomena that arise in the spontaneous constitution of third order coupling, and social systems, the third order unities that are thus constituted. The form embodied by unities of this class varies considerably from insects to primates or ungulates, the antelope. What is common to them is that whenever they arise, they generate a particular type of internal phenomenology in which the individual ontogenies of all the participating organisms occur fundamentally as part of the network of co-ontogenies that they bring about in constituting third order unities or social phenomena. Since the constitution of a social system entails the actual co-ontogeny of its components, it entails their reciprocal structural coupling, and any particular organism is a member of a social unity only as long as it forms part of that reciprocal structural coupling. We call communication the coordinated behaviors mutually triggered among the members of a social unity. In this way, we can understand communication to be a particular type of behavior with or without the presence of a nervous system. And as with all behaviors, if we can distinguish the instinctive or learned nature of social behavior, we can distinguish between phylogenic and ontogenic forms of communication. The particular feature of communication is not that it results from a mechanism distinct from other behaviors. It takes place in a domain of social behaviors. So a case of non-human communication is the singing of certain birds, such as the parrots and its close relatives. They ordinarily live in a dense forest with little or no visual contact, so mating couples form and coordinate through producing a common song. Each member of the couple builds a phrase which the other continues. This melody is peculiar to each couple and is defined by the history of their mating. So the particular melody of each couple is unique to its history of coupling, and the offspring of this coupling then produce melodies different from those of their parents. So the particular melody of each couple is limited to the life of the participating individuals. Another example of ontogenic behavior in birds comes from England. In metropolitan London, new milk bottles were capped with thin aluminum covers instead of the stiff cardboard. After a short time, in this change, some birds, namely the blue titmice, learned how to puncture the covers and feed on the top of the layer of cream. This behavior spread from this focal point to all the British Isles. In a short time, all the blue titmice had learned the trick of getting a good breakfast. So vertebrates have an essential and unique capacity, which is imitation. Exactly what imitation is in terms of nervous physiology is not easy to say, but imitation permits a certain mode of interaction to go beyond the ontogeny of one individual, and then it remains more or less invariant through successive generations. If the chicks of the titmice could not imitate, the habit of eating cream from the bottles would have to be invented anew in each generation. So it's the same with us. Now we're going to move into linguistic domains in human consciousness.
Okay.
And we just talked about how when two or more organisms interact recurrently, they generate a social coupling or a third order coupling. In that coupling, they are reciprocally or Ayni involved in attaining their respective poiesis. Behaviors that take place in these domains of social coupling are communicative and can be inborn or acquired. Innate behaviors depend on structures that arise in the organism independently of its particular ontogeny. Acquired communicative behaviors depend on the particular ontogeny of the organism and are contingent on its peculiar history of social interactions. We call such learned communicative behaviors a linguistic domain because such behaviors constitute the basis for language, while they're not yet identical with language. So linguistic domain is saying that human linguistic behaviors are in fact behaviors in a domain of reciprocal ontogenic structural coupling, which we human beings establish and maintain as a result of our collective ontogenies. Instinctive communicative behaviors whose stability depends on the genetic stability of the species and not on the cultural stability of the social system in which they take place do not constitute a linguistic domain, as they do not give rise to ontogenically generated domains of coordination of communicative behavior. The so-called language of bees, for instance, is not a language. It is a mixed case of instinctive and linguistic behaviors. Linguistic domains arise as a cultural drift in a social system with no pre-established design. But human beings are not the only species that generate linguistic domains in their social existence. What is particular to us humans is that in our linguistic coordinations of actions, we give rise to a new phenomenal domain, the domain of language. As language arises, objects also arise as linguistic distinctions that obscure the actions they coordinate. So the word table coordinates our actions with respect to the actions we perform when we manipulate a table, but it obscures the actions that bring forth the table. In other words, we are in language. We are in language, or we language only when through a reflexive action we make a linguistic distinction of a linguistic distinction. To operate in language is to operate in a domain of congruent co-ontogenic structural coupling. There is a key feature of language that radically modifies human behavioral domains and makes possible new phenomena such as reflection and consciousness. This key feature is that language enables those who operate in it, in language, to describe themselves and their circumstances through the linguistic distinction of linguistic distinctions. With language arises also the observer as the languaging entity. So by operating in a language with other observers, this entity generates the self and its circumstances as linguistic distinctions of its participation in the linguistic domain. In this way, meaning arises as a relationship of linguistic distinctions, and meaning becomes part of our domain of conservation and adaptation. All this is what it means it is to be human. We human beings are human beings only in language. We make descriptions of the descriptions that we make. Which is so true. We are observers and exist in a semantic domain created by our operating in language where ontogenic adaptation is conserved. Because we have language, there is no limit to what we can describe, imagine, and relate. However, for years, it's been the dogma of our culture that language is absolutely and exclusively a human privilege. This idea is on the wane with the studies of animal life. These studies have shown that animals such as apes and dolphins display behavioral possibilities that we have not wanted to grant them. All the studies on the linguistic capacity of primates like the chimpanzee, gorilla, orangutan help us understand the linguistic history of us human beings. These animals belong to lineages that run parallel and very closely to ours. Despite a 98% overlapping with humans in nucleic acid sequences, or DNA. So we share 98% of us are identical with the primates. Their behavioral preferences are very different from ours. So language arose as a result of loving cooperation, Ayni. Self-conscious, awareness, mind, these are phenomena that take place in language, and as they take place only in the social domain. What we say reflects what we live, not what happens from the perspective of an independent observer. There are experiments that have been done that tell us something fundamental about the organization and coherence in daily life of the ongoing flow of reflections that we call consciousness and that we associate with our identity. And on one hand, these studies show us that language is a condition for the experience of what we call mind. And on the other hand, they show us that our experiences flow according to coherences in the operation of our nervous system, to which we have no access as observers, yet which necessarily occur as part of our ontogenic drift. It is in language that the self the I arises as the social singularity defined by the operational intersection in the human body of the recursive linguistic distinctions in which it is distinguished. This tells us that in the network of linguistic interactions in which we move, we maintain an ongoing descriptive recursion, which we call the I. Not the I, the I. It enables us to conserve our linguistic operational coherence and our adaptation in the domain of language. So we've seen that a living being exists only as long as it drifts in a domain of perturbations, regardless of the characteristics of that domain or how it changes because of its own operation. We then saw that the nervous system generates a behavioral dynamic through generating relationships of interneuronal activity in its operational closure. The living system at every level is organized to generate internal regularities. The same occurs in the social coupling through language, in the network of conversations which language generates, and through which their closure constitute the unity of a particular human society. This new dimension of operational coherence of our languaging together is what we experience as consciousness and their mind and ourselves. Words are tokens for linguistic coordination of actions and not things we can move from one place to another. It is our history of recurrent interactions that make possible our ontogenic structural drift and a structural coupling that affords interpersonal coordination of actions. This takes place in the world we share because we have specified it together through our actions. And this is so obvious that we are literally blind to it. Only when our structural coupling goes awry in some dimension of our existence do we realize, if we reflect on it, the extent to which our behavioral coordinations in the manipulation of our world and communication are inseparable from our experience. The structural coupling going awry breaks down in some dimension common to our everyday life. These are instances of change in the direction of our ontogenic structural drift in an infinite process of historical transformation. And we're usually unaware of the historical texture behind the linguistic and biological coherences involved in the simplest of actions in our social life. So it is that the appearance of language in humans and of the whole social context in which it appears generates a new phenomenon of mind and self-consciousness as mankind's most intimate experience. Without an appropriate history of interactions, it is impossible to enter into this human domain. Remember the wolf girl story where she was raised with, her and her sister were raised with the wolves and they didn't know how to be human. At the same time, as a phenomenon of languaging in the network of social and linguistic coupling, the mind is not something that is in our brains. Consciousness and mind belong to the realm of social coupling, as this is the locus of their dynamics. As part of the human social dynamics, mind and consciousness operate as selectors of the path which our ontogenic structural drift follows. And since we exist in language, the domains of discourse that we generate become part of our domain of existence and constitute part of our environment in which we conserve identity and adaptation. Either we generate, that just struck me as to that sentence. Since we exist in language, the domains of discourse that we generate become part of our domain of existence. That is why, and constitute part of our environment in which we conserve identity and adaptation. This is why small villages become or small communities, or Southeast Oklahoma becomes known for its way of being. That just really settled in. Either we generate a linguistic domain, which is a social domain, through what we say and do to conserve our identity as scientists or whatever we call ourselves is conserved, or we disappear as such. Every structure is compelling. We humans as humans exist in a network of structural couplings that we continually weave through the permanent linguistic trophallaxis of our behavior. Language was never invented by anyone only to take in an outside world, so it cannot be used as a tool to reveal that world. Rather, it is the outside world. Rather, it is by languaging that the act of knowing and the behavioral coordination, which is language, brings forth a world. We work out our lives in mutual linguistic coupling, or Ayni, not because language permits us to reveal ourselves, but because we are constituted in language in a continuous becoming that we bring forth with others. We find ourselves in this co-ontogenic coupling, or Ayni, as an ongoing transformation in the becoming of the linguistic world that we build with other human beings. And that's where we'll stop for tonight.
Wow, that's also technical, huh?
Technical, but wow, like I said, it's just starting to sink in that, yes, that, yeah, that's how cultures get established, right? Since we exist in language, the domains of discourse that we generate or conversation that we generate conserve our identity and adaptation.
Mm-hmm. And that's why it's also such an important thing, culture. It's such a crucial thing. And destroying culture is a crucial thing if you want to destroy humans.
Well, but on the other hand, too, like what I see here and what I've heard with read with the morphogenic fields is that if your environment where you conserve your identity and adaptation becomes too small, it has no topography, it has no variation, and so that's also when you disappear as such. It has to have more structural coupling to continue. It has to expand. It has to, right? That's why breaking into these tiny little communities is people are just like, but they're all inbred. They're all, and you can't, there has to be some diversity, other perturbations and structural coupling.
Right. Well, so this leaves for a lot of sinking in and a lot of more to come.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you want to give us a hint of what next week's conversation will be?
The tree of knowledge.
Oh wow! Well, I say oh wow because on the booklet I'm editing right now, and to tell folks, Aloha Ayni Now Living has this series of little books that are very nicely illustrated that go along with the halau, which is the kind of like the training, I would say the healing, the training, the initiation process where you can join the tribe, you can join the nation, you can join the community, you can join the ranch, you can join the land, you can join the dehesa, whatever you want to call it, but you join, and so there's this kind of training or this teaching or this process, and for that there's these little booklets, and I'm currently editing one of those, and that tree of knowledge has become kind of the graphical topic for this fourth booklet. Tree of knowledge, so it's pretty cool. So we're going to talk about the tree of knowledge just as it is.
Right. And then after that, we'll get into the contain branch.
Okay. Wow. Wow. Well, is there anything else we should share or do? Should we start closing or just
Yeah, we can
finish it
start.
up? Just maybe invite people if they want to find us. They'll find the link
Yeah.
everywhere. Aloha Ayni Dao Living, that's where you'll find us. And I want to say thanks to all the viewers and all the people and all the hearts that are opened to listen to this. And you're welcome to join and you're welcome to help out. Because
So,
according to today, if there's no structural coupling, there's nothing.
and on that, we can say that, we'll say again, maybe we need to say it every week, that Aloha Ayni Dao Living is a playful adventure of crafting our world, the daily living needs of what we need, while we establish Aloha Ayni Dao Living in matriarchal gift, old growth, gift culture, economy, gift economy culture villages, where we all work together to help each other to just have a more beautiful world.
Right.
Cohesive world of Aloha Ayni Dao, of just being in the way of heaven, the way of the flow.
Right. So that's so important to point out, that being in the flow, coming back to the flow, coming back to nature, evolving, growing spiritually, it's not just words and images and praise, and it's also crafting. It's also doing things with your hands. It's also about that.
So we don't wait for someone else to do it for us. We don't wait for centralized government or parts to come from China, or
so we're not enslaved by our own incapacities to craft our lives.
right.
That's a good way to say it.
Exactly.
So wonderful. There's so much more to say, and we've said so much throughout 89 sessions, and there's probably some 100 or 200 more to come. So don't miss them, and send loves to everyone. And with that, I'll cut the live stream.
The sessions will continue as long as we're establishing Aloha Ayni Dao to living on Earth.
See, so it's coming for a while.
Yep.
So see you soon.